So today we are joined by Matt Lowe from the RegTech and Analytics Team from the Financial Conduct Authority. Delighted to be joined by Matt, who's got a huge wealth of experience in not just the field of privacy enhancing technology, but in the FCA's approach to tech sprints. Matt, there's been a lot of interest in the FCA TechSprint last year. I think a lot of interest in what the follow-up may have been, what the lessons are from your perspective. So if you could take us through some of that thinking, that would be fantastic.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Nick, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the work that we've done as well, and really appreciate you guys being involved almost at the outset when I first joined the team back 3 years ago. So, you know, I'm glad to be going on this journey with you guys almost at the same time. I'm just going to share my screen. What I'll do first is I'll just talk about the tech sprint. What does a tech sprint mean? Essentially, this is a hackathon style of event, and FCA has never really been comfortable with us saying hack and FCA in the same sentence. So we had to come up with new terminology for so that we can express what we're trying to do. But for anybody that's familiar with a hackathon, you're bringing together industry experts to work on some specific problem, usually via some coding and providing some data, and then you let the brains, I guess, get on with actually providing the solutions.
It was interesting, just on the terminology, Austrac, the Australian FIU and supervisor, went for codathon. I think for the very same reason, you know, there's a shyness about using the word hackathon.
Yeah, I guess it does have a bit of a negative reaction to when you're in the regulator space. I've been to one in the US by FINRA, and they call it a buildathon. So everybody's trying to avoid that word hack, I think.
Yeah.
But essentially, everybody kind of knows what a hackathon is, and I think it's the easiest way to explain it. Yeah, so we've run 7 of these so far, and they've been reasonably successful. Some of them go from a stage where we're able to get some proof of concepts off the ground, and you know, one of the first things we were exploring was digital regulatory reporting, and that's now in sort of its pilot phase and trying to roll something more that's more viable out of that. But where we've been kind of focusing our attention on the previous work that we've been doing is like money laundering and financial crime. So there's a good reason to tackling money laundering and financial crime, and this slide kind of just demonstrates, you know, why it's such a big issue. And you know, you can see here that I mean, the headline one that we always sort of quote is that 1.6 trillion US dollars is laundered through the financial system every year, but we're only detecting about 1% of that. So you know, that's really small amount, and this kind of humanizes it a little bit. Like, as you can see here on the slide, there's 40.3 million victims of human trafficking worldwide. 10.1 million of those are children, and you know, so there's some real world impacts on money laundering, and it's trying to sort of expose that to the people we would have developing in the tech sprint is really important for them to understand and contextualize how big the problem actually is. So we've chosen money laundering and financial crime for those reasons. Now, one of the things that we've had some various events about and some roundtables, and we've kind of discussed, you know, ways that we could do this. So what would be the best approaches, and kind of 3 high level things come to mind. One was changing the culture, and how do you influence that, you know, across the world to try and get everybody to work on the problem, whether that's with the regulators, with industry, with technologists. You know, how do we get ourselves working together a little bit better on this? And the second one was digital ID, which we aren't focusing on at the moment, but I think it'd be something that we'll be picking up maybe later on next year, and thinking about how digital ID plays a big part in trying to stop this problem. And the third one was data sharing, and this is where privacy enhancing technologies come in. So we kind of were exploring the different types of technologies out there where you could share information about an individual, but not necessarily share the actual data about the individual. So you're more like sharing networks or patterns of behavior. It could be sharing some aggregated information that will give you some further insight to help tackle the problem. So, as I said, last year we did this tech sprint. It was a global one. They seem to be getting bigger over the years, and ever since I started, they seem to be a lot bigger than when they first were initiated. And that, I think initially we had about maybe 20 people that were coming to these events, and it was a really kind of close-knit group. But now it's gone out to, you know, last one we had 60 organizations, we had 180 participants, we had a satellite office in Washington, DC that were working on similar use cases and problems. And then at the end of it, this is the way it plays out. So we have 2 or 3 days of getting people familiar with the problem and coding and trying to develop these solutions. And the final day, we have like a final demo session. The purpose of that is to then showcase some of the work that's being done throughout the event. For this particular tech sprint, we had 800 plus people that viewed the final demos. But that wasn't all in a physical location. We had about half of them at the FCA offices. The other 400 were dialing in virtually. So we're able to spread out a little bit further by actually making some of the videos accessible and streaming it. All of this can be found on our website, by the way. You can still see the demos. We've recorded them and we've put them on our website. If you were to search for FCA AML TechSprint 2019, it'll take you to the landing page where you can see some of those solutions. So the developers have got something to actually work with. We created a whole heap of synthetic data assets. And to give you kind of an idea about the scale of that, we had 6 UK fictional banks that we built with 900,000 entities operating within that ecosystem, and about 1.5 billion transactions over 2 years. And the whole point of that is, when money laundering is happening, it's not happening in one bank, it's happening in multiple banks, and it's happening in multiple jurisdictions. And so you want to try and create this synthetic world that brings out that whole ecosystem and how it all fits together. So we seeded in financial crime typologies, we seeded in money laundering typologies, and all of that was represented, and all the behaviors are represented in that sort of ecosystem of data. So these are the privacy enhancing technologies we went after. I won't go into any detail about what all of these do, but because I think there's other people who are probably better versed at sort of explaining them anyway. But I guess the point of most of them is to go, okay, well, how do you share that information but without exploiting the data that's behind it? So for GDPR, that means, who is the individual that's behind a specific transaction? You might just need to know, okay, what are the network behaviors? And that's where like multi-party computation come in, federated learning come in, homomorphic encryption. So there were 3 winners out of the 10 teams in total. 5 of them went on to try and develop their proof of concepts a little bit further. Now that's kind of where we struggle a bit. We as a regulator can't actually be promoting any particular solution, and especially within the realms of our competition remit. So we can act as an observer, and we can go in and we can sort of give them a bit of a guidance, but we still have to be careful about what we give out and what we can say and do. And that's where I think we kind of hit this stumbling block when it comes to some of the tech sprints getting from proof of concept to what we call proof of value. So we came up with this. Well, how do we, just to kind of give you a bit more background of what happens after a tech sprint, is we'll have all this infrastructure built, and we have the data provided for the developers, and then at the end of it, we just decommission everything. So all the developers lose access to the data, they lose access to the environments. They generally go off back to their own jobs, so they have to, they're doing this sort of side of desk, but they don't have access to all that good stuff that we gave them, and it's difficult to get them to mobilize and get behind a particular problem. So we've been probing the idea internally, at least for a couple of years anyway. We've been doing a bit of navel gazing on a digital sandbox pilot. And this is essentially to test out similar features to what we provide for a tech sprint. It's like access to high quality data assets. It's a regulatory call to action. So what are the use cases or problem statements that we're going after? Having a collaboration platform where people can actually develop and they can work together and understand what they're doing. An observation deck, so we can bring in other regulators from across the world who might want to look at some of the work that's happening and help sharing some of our knowledge and sharing some of the insights that are coming out of the sandbox. An API marketplace, so this is a place where you've got a list of APIs and they could be relevant to the particular use case or problem statement, so you might be able to get access to more data. And access to regulatory support. So we do provide this to the tech sprints in a light touch way, but the regulatory support that we're thinking about for the pilot is to give a sort of a bit more of a heavy-handed way where we could actually go in and have some of our FCA colleagues go in and look at these solutions and give them some advice or guidance. So I'm not going to go into the use cases because like there's a lot of them there, but I guess there's one specific use case when it comes to privacy enhancing technologies. But for the digital sandbox pilot, just to be clear, we're focusing ourselves onto COVID-19 because obviously there's a big issue with COVID at the moment, and we've come up with 2 or 3 themes that we think we should go after. But I guess the main one when it comes to privacy enhancing technologies is the one that I'm showing here, and it's still looking at not necessarily money laundering, but we're looking at fraud, given that there's an increase in scams around COVID-19. How do we share information with relevant bodies, public, private sector? How do we share that data real time? And so when you have some fraud that's being committed or actioned, you can actually start to see how they're fitting out across the whole network. So we're looking to try and through the pilot create this sort of ecosystem again, like I described before, but do that in that's just solely based on fraud and COVID-19 scams in particular. So that's where we'd be exploring privacy enhancing technology. There are other use cases, but given that we're talking about pets, I'm just focusing on that at the moment. And in particular, when it comes to testing pets, and you're always looking to test sharing data against multiple entities, one of the biggest problems you're going to have is either going to be that you could be exposing somebody to GDPR risk, or you could be exposing people to competition law risk. So banks aren't really going to be sharing their information with each other, easily. So you want to do it in a way where, okay, if you have the data assets, you can prove a particular problem or that you're trying to solve, and your technology can do it. It sort of shortens the procurement cycles of trying to get something like this off the ground. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing Digital Sandbox. Yeah, so the second objective is to create this suite of data assets that we've used with Digital Sandbox pilot. And we kind of propose that, it will be exclusively used for the Digital Sandbox pilot initially, but with the end goal after the Digital Sandbox pilot is over, we would make those data assets publicly available. So if anybody's working in pets and they've seen some of the work that we've done, but they're coming into it late to the party, they might be able to pick up these data sets and try and prove that their particular technology works. The end goal for us is to make sure that whatever we create for the Digital Sandbox is in some way becomes a public utility. If you'd like to contact me, the best way to do that is through digital.sandbox@fca.org.uk. We did make an announcement back in March. Chris Bullard did it on a podcast, and it's out there in the public domain now. So if you actually go and search for FCA Digital Sandbox, it'll take you to our landing page where you find out a bit more info. But if you've got any further questions, the best way to get in touch will be straight through that email address, and then I can talk to you directly if you want any more information, or if you actually just want to participate, or there's anything else in general that you want to have a chat to us about privacy enhancing technologies, because we still see that there's a real value in pets and going forwards, and I don't think that we're going to lose sight of them in the foreseeable future.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that, Matt. I attended the TechSprint, and I thought it was a really well put together event. And typically in the AML financial crime world, there is a common moan that there is a disconnect between the financial crime stakeholders and the data protection stakeholders. And I think what was so powerful about the TechSprint is that you really worked hand in glove, it appeared, with the Information Commissioner's Office. Can you talk through why that was important and how that worked in practice?
Yeah, so I guess I could probably echo some of those moans that you kind of just described. Like we keep on hearing from a regulator's point of view, say, well, yeah, we'd love to share more information, but GDPR now, it kind of makes that a bit more difficult. And, we always thought there was some sort of tension between GDPR legislation and AML financial crime legislation. So we made sure that we brought in experts to, both people who work in the money laundering field and financial crime, and also bringing ICO and other lawyers who work with GDPR, just to test that out. And essentially they came back and said, yeah, well, there actually is no issue if you're using these privacy enhancing technologies. They are safe to use in the environment, and you're still not going to breach GDPR if you're using them. And that's why we sort of bring in the ICO in to validate that for us as well. they are now interested in privacy enhancing technologies, and I believe that they're releasing a paper later this year in relation to pets. So there really is value in those technologies in sort of combating, what people are perceiving as a bit of a barrier to using it. But from our understanding, there's not a barrier at all.
Fantastic. And obviously within our study, the FFIS study, publishing a number of case studies which are outside of this FCA TechSprint framework, but actually moving forward with some banks, some technologists, other participants to really explore that technology. So bringing some of that to life. And through the course of our study into 2021, we'll be engaging with some of these more thorny issues about what's the appropriate role of the supervisor, data protection authority. Is there a case for legislative change? What is really the significance and clarity around the significance from a GDPR perspective of the use of privacy enhancing technology? So we hope to have you engaged in that study as it moves forward. But this video, obviously, there's a limit to how much time we have, and I'm sure we could go on for hours, and I'm sure you'll get questions in response to this. So just thank you very much for your time, Matt. I know you're very busy, and a very exciting initiative with the Digital Sandbox moving ahead. So thank you very much for your time today to talk us through that.
No, brilliant, and thanks, Dick, and thanks again for your ongoing support, and happy to help where we can.
Many thanks, Matt.
All right, thank you.